and welcome to the Wandering Creatives Podcast. I'm your host, Allie, and joining me for today's episode is Paula Benner of Especially You. Thanks so much for joining me. Paula, you and we've had a few conversations, and it's always such a fantastic time chatting with you. Before we recorded, we did a pre-interview, and you have so much knowledge and information to share, and I really cannot wait for you to share your experience with our listeners on the podcast today. So thanks so much for joining me. So a little bit about what you do. You create smocked items, which I'm going to be completely honest, I did have to look up what that meant because I was not sure. But you create smock items, and each thing is done by hand, which is extraordinary. And you've been going to craft shows and fairs for about 6-7 years now. And I think our listeners are going to be really interested in hearing what your experience has been like, especially for someone who's gone through that transition of kind of like advertising by word of mouth to having to kind of fully dive into social media and learn that, and how you kind of navigated that whole world since you didn't really grow up with it, which a lot of our listeners have. I think the majority of the listeners are millennials or elder millennials. So, we've kind of grown up with the internet and social media in our teens and 20s. But for other generations, I imagine that transition was a lot different for y'all. But I'll stop there. I'll stop prattling on. And I'll let Paula, I'll have you introduce yourself. And if you could share a little bit about how you got started with smocking, and then also explain what smocking is, that would be wonderful.
Okay. My name is Paula Benner, and right now I live in Lynchburg, Virginia with my husband and our 2 cats and our very ill dog. As of today, our house is in shambles because we are moving to Roanoke, Virginia on the 1st and 2nd of November. So you can well imagine what the house looks like, and we won't discuss it. It'll be easier. English smocking, and I had to do a little research as to how to tell everybody or how to explain what English smocking is. So English smocking is embroidery on pre-pleated fabric. Boy, that was hard to say. Pre-pleated fabric. So you plait the fabric and then you do the embroidery on top of the plates. Oh. You can either do picture smocking, which comes out looking like whatever you started with. I've got a bear project that I'll be working on soon that will look like the bears. Or geometric, which is just pretty designs with different colors to coordinate with the fabric. I prefer picture smocking just because I like seeing the designs come to life, but they both are fun and they both work. And sometimes people prefer one over the other.
Yeah, I did not realize that smocking was on the pleated you're right, the pleated fabric. I guess I thought it was just like a form of embroidery, I guess. So that makes sense, because otherwise it would just be.
Well, it is a form of embroidery, but it's how you do the embroidery. So that's the different part.
Okay. And you started off as a knitter, right? And then you found your way to smocking. How did that happen?
Apparently, when I was born, I wound up with the knitting crocheting bug, or whatever you want to call it. I learned to knit in front of my grandmother, who was knitting behind me, and she was instructing me in front of her, which is kind of a unique way to start that, but that is the way it is. And during that time, there weren't all that many television shows on. So knitting in the evening and with family and talking was a normal part of life. Later in life, I taught myself to crochet, and even the fine crochet with the thread that people look at and go, oh my goodness, I can't do that. Actually, it's not that bad. That's done with metal needles, and the needles that I'm using now were my great-grandmother's. So I have significant heritage with that as well. And I just panic completely if I lose one of those needles. But anyway, from there, I migrated to counted cross stitch, and a lot of people do that, which is fine. I still like counted cross stitch. I don't do it that much. From there, I migrated myself to smocking, thinking, oh, this is cool. Let's try this. So in other words, I'm one of those ones that goes, let's try a new skill periodically.
Yeah. And was it just kind of like, did you research smocking a little bit, or did you see it somewhere? Or were you just like, oh, this is the natural progression from crocheting, cross stitching to smocking?
I don't say that anything in my life is a natural progression. It just kind of occurs.
Yeah.
But I do like needle arts in various forms. I am even spinning wool now, I really like that one, but I am very, very stingy about my wool.
Oh,
Basically,
very
I
cool.
spin for me. But yeah, I have 2 spinning wheels and spin as well.
Oh, that's amazing. Oh, I love that. So do you still like dabble in like your knitting and your crocheting and your other needlework, or is it just you just like I only have time to smock now?
I knit mostly little booties, baby booties. That is what my mother did when she was giving gifts to somebody that was having a baby, was give them a set of hand knit booties. So I keep up that tradition with a bunch of booties already made. I have a bunch of crocheted with the fine thread, crocheted hat and booty sets that are ready to go. I do the owl hats. I'm sure you've seen those, the hats with the owls to the front. I also have a little bear hat that has gotten very popular that I do make sure I have a few of those as well as a sheep hat. So I kind of dabble in a little of everything. In my work basket at the moment, there is probably 3 or 4 projects sitting there, different things, not the same thing, different things. I'll get bored with one or my hands will get tired and I'll go to the next project.
Do you think this might be kind of like maybe a little bit of a philosophical question? I don't know. But what do you think it is about needlework besides kind of like it being in your family that draws you to it? Like, do you find it kind of therapeutic or comforting, or?
Yeah, it's really very relaxing. You're sitting there with the needle. My husband has gotten used to, in our year and a half of marriage, he's gotten used to me sitting over there beside him while he's working on whatever. And I'm sitting here, stitching, cross-stitching, or not usually cross-stitching, stitching, crocheting, knitting, whatever. And he's gotten used to that. So it's a way for us to be together and spend time together without necessarily talking or conversing. We're in the same room.
Yeah, I know a lot of folks use like knitting as like I personally, when I was knitting a lot, would use it to just kind of like zone out for a little bit and focus only on like what was in my hands rather than like everything that was going on in my brain. So
yeah, well, and I have found that the spinning, when I actually have a chance to spin and the cats will leave the yarn alone, is very soothing as well because of the repetitive motion of the wheel, and you're treadling with the wheel and it's a repetitive motion, and my brain is somewhere else entirely and the yarn is being produced in front of me, it's just soothing and relaxing.
Oh, I bet. It just makes me think of like Renaissance fairs, like and the big like wool festival that they have in Virginia, and just oh my gosh, I love it. I would love to be able to like make my own yarn. You started off as a knitter, naturally kind of progressed into smocking, and then you started getting into kind of the market life, I guess, and you've been doing markets for. Was that right about like 6 or 7 years or closer to a decade?
That's probably about right, because I don't know that I was thinking about time at the time. I was just kind of going, oh, this is a good idea. I've got enough stuff. Let's see if it'll sell. So I took it to market, first of all, by myself with the table and all the things that go along with the market. And it got to the point that it was way too much for me to handle on my own. So right now, my husband is going with me, and he is in a powered wheelchair for things like that because of distance. So he was ferrying things back and forth with the wheelchair back to the van, or from the van or back to the van this weekend at the show that we were at. And that worked out well. I think probably at some point I need to consider a setup teardown person. To help with the mechanics of getting things in the box and getting things out to where they need to be. But it worked well this weekend, and we had time. It was a setup Friday and show was on Saturday, so that worked a little better. But the shows have been interesting. When I started doing shows, I was doing a lot of things that were in the middle of town, like Centerfest in Bedford, or a bunch of the cities have something in the middle of town. And those were great at first. And as the pandemic approached, up to before the pandemic and then after the pandemic, people are going there to relieve their own stress. They're not going to shop. They are going to play the games. They're going to take the kids out to play. They're going for the food vendors, which is wonderful. But for crafters, you have to look at that and go, okay, then I don't need to be at this kind of show.
Yeah. And as many makers will know that do craft markets or maker markets or fairs, whatever you want to call them, there is a booth fee, which maybe listeners, like people who don't do markets, don't realize that, but we actually pay to be there.
Yeah.
So when you go to these things and folks are not in a buying mood, it often ends up, you're coming out in the red.
Very easy to do. And you have to consider all that as you go to a market and the distance from you. This one involved an overnight hotel stay, which was wonderful. We had no problem with that, but it was another expense, and then lunch and supper and, those kind of things. And you have to take that into account when you consider your booth fee and whatever for a show as to what you're actually making for profit.
And one of the things that we had discussed in a previous conversation was kind of the art of how to set up your booth and the difference that your booth setup can make.
Yeah.
And I can't remember, so please remind me, but did you have a background in marketing, right? Yes. Okay.
Degree in marketing, yes.
Yeah, because I was like, I'm trying to remember from our first conversation, and it definitely comes through, especially when you talk about how your booth setup can really make a huge difference. And in your experience with booths, what are some of the main components of like a maker's booth or your booth that can affect your success at a market?
The show that we were at this weekend was a new show for me, so I had no experience with size and what it was going to look like, et cetera, et cetera. They can tell me a size all they want, but my brain doesn't do that. I want to see the space anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So if we do that booth again, we've already decided it needs to either be a corner booth or two booths, one or the other. There was not enough room. Because I do children's clothing and in various sizes, I want people to be able to get in there and look like you do in a store, in a boutique or something like that. Mm-hmm. So we bought 2 spiralizers. They stand on a pole and it spirals up, and the clothes hang on there. And as it happened, I had 2 spiralizers and still ran out of room, but that's okay. I can deal with that. I'm not buying another one. But to have the spiralizers so that people could look around, look at everything that was there by the size, because the size was on the outside, and decide whether they wanted something for a girl or a boy, or what they liked or what they didn't like. And the other thing about markets is you may or may not make sales that day. And if you do, thank you. It's a good thing. And I did make decent amount of sales with everything that we had. But there's also the contact information, handing people a card, and they're going, do you do da 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 da? Yes, I have. I'll do whatever you'd like me to do in cotton fabric with an approximate turnaround time for them, so that they know that if they send me an order, it's not going to be 6 years before they get it. It's going to be a certain amount of time. Mm-hmm. Usually my turnaround is about 3 weeks, which is bad. Something else is the size, how it looks as people approach it, and lights. Even in a lighted setting, some kind of lights. I had little stove-in lights, and we decided not to put them on oscillate or whatever you want to call it, because it was going to be distracting to us. Yeah. So we left it on normal, and the little lights did shine all day, which was great. But I think the lights draw people to you because they're seeing something that's bright and cheerful. Something I added this year that I think has been a boon to everything is a PowerPoint presentation. It does not have to be elaborate. It doesn't have to be, something that is beyond your capability of making a PowerPoint. But the PowerPoint with what I have, the sizes that I have, a little bit about the business with the logos and things like that they're seeing pictures of, that's progressing during the day, so that when they're walking up to the booth, they're seeing all of this movement in front of them and going, okay, this is what we've got.
Yeah, they want to stop and check it out.
Right. That people also see what's available, and they will ask questions, or they will find out a little bit about what I'm doing through that PowerPoint without me saying a word at the beginning. Depending upon your space, working on your craft at the show draws attention as well. English smocking in particular, because it's not a very well-known art, will draw people. What are you doing? Or my mom used to do that, or my grandma used to do that, and that's another draw. Past 2 shows, I used a door prize to not only collect marketing information, but also to actually give out the door prize. So, and that was that, you go in there and sign, you put your information on there, whatever you're comfortable with. And this door prize is given away at the end of the show. So I still have a door prize to mail out from this weekend, like I don't have anything else to do, but that's beside the point. But
not like you're moving or anything.
The point is that people will give you that information for the door prize without thinking that you're going.
Yeah, and building that. Oh, I have so many things I want to follow up on. Okay, so
I warned you. I made a list.
I'm like, to begin with. Do you find that, okay, so you have a PowerPoint. Do you usually like engage with people when they come into your booth, or do you kind of just let them look around in peace and quiet? You know what I mean?
Most crafters do this, or most crafters that I know that do well do this. Let me put it that way. As people approach, hi, how are you today? Something simple. It doesn't have to be, 15 minutes of conversation. Something simple. Hi, how are you today? And when they start looking, I usually ask them if they want me to help them with the size, or boy or girl, or seasonal. If they say no, I just back off. If they say yes, I'll say, well, we've got this and this size and this and this size, and just kind of go from there. But the fact that you are talking to them at all draws them into the booth in some ways as well. My husband was a politician, bless his heart. And I always tell him that he can talk to a wall and it will answer him back. So he is a perfect companion for this, because whatever I'm doing, he's doing something opposite. Mm-hmm. And we're both getting, things done around it. And it's worked out really well. We are just made for each other. We've decided that.
That's something I keep hearing kind of the same thing. Like I'm meeting all of these makers that have like a spouse or partner and they have that kind of that same dynamic where they're like, right. I'm kind of an introvert, I just want to make my stuff, but my husband is the one that is out there like hollering at people, getting them to come into the booth and like
whatever works.
Yeah.
Whatever
and so
works.
It's really interesting to kind of see that as a theme kind of amongst makers. Yeah, because one of my I'm still working on my own booth layout. I don't think I've figured it out yet, but someone mentioned to me that when you set things back farther under your tent, people have to walk in to look at it, and some people are less likely to walk into an area rather than if you just put everything like towards the front of the booth, they're more likely to kind of stop in and look. What's your opinion on that?
Well, it depends on what you have. Mm-hmm. With the clothing, they have got to come in, and I usually I will invite them. That will be part of what I say, do come in and look. Just something, simple and off the wall and not pressuring. The lady beside me Saturday had things that were in the table in front, and that worked out well for her because of what she had. So it's going to depend on what your product are, whether you give them a space to come in and look, or you have it all so that they're going around the outside edge. People are different. People that are just looking will kind of glance and go by, and you can almost identify a browser before they get to your table almost. Yeah. And I've gotten so that doesn't bother me anymore. It used to. I just, I will say hi, be nice, be friendly. And if they browse, so what, just let them go and go on to the next person. But how you set your booth up depends upon what you have and what you need people to see. The PowerPoint for me is a draw, though, because they're coming in to see what is on that PowerPoint.
Do you have that set up where you bring like a TV with you, or do you project it onto like a wall of your tent, or how?
It's on my laptop, my smaller laptop. Yeah, it's on my laptop.
Oh, interesting.
Yep.
I have not seen anyone do that around here recently, I don't think, but that's a good idea. When it comes to like your booth layout, do you change it for every market, or do you just make tweaks as needed for like bigger markets, like holiday markets, and like, the really kind of big
depends on your size of your booth.
Oh, well, yeah.
As to what you can get in where. I have grid walls as well on legs that we finally got a good system for to set the grid walls up. So we had the grid walls on the right-hand side, and the spiralizers on the left-hand side, and the table back in the middle. Normally what I would do is would have the table forward and I would be behind the table, but there wasn't enough room to do that. So it depends on what your space is and how you decide
what's going to work,
how to set it up. But depending upon what your main product is, that should be the thing that is in the front for people to go walk by and see. So the little kids' clothes, the various sizes, that's what they see first.
So I guess that kind of goes perfectly, I think, into my next question, which is like, is there, from a marketing standpoint, I guess, is there kind of like a psychological like method maybe, or something to like, for how you should set up your booth a certain way that will trigger emotions or like bring people in? Or is it, again, kind of just based on what you're selling?
Well, once again, it depends on what you have. But in my case, with the clothing, that will bring up a psychological nick to them. Oh, my grandmother made me whatever. Oh, my mother made me whatever. And they'll come in and look, and they may or may not have kids. That's fine, whatever. And then somebody else will come in behind them and look and be looking at the same time that may have whatever. The other thing is to know your market, know who is your customer. Just basics. Who is your customer? Are you selling to grandmothers? Are you selling to mothers? Are you selling to people with no children? Are you selling? Who are you selling to, or who would you like to be selling to?
Yeah, that's a better way.
Yeah.
Anyone, Paula. Anyone.
Well, yeah, but if you're in business doing this, you pretty much know what group of people are going to buy your product.
Mm-hmm.
In most cases, my market is mothers with small children, grandmothers, especially grandmothers with grandchildren that are far away, or somebody that's looking for a baby gift. That's pretty much the market.
Yeah. I have one more question related to markets, and then I want to backtrack to something you said because it is an important thing. But if you had to give like one or two pieces of advice for makers that are out there going to the markets and the fairs, what advice would you give them based on your experience?
First one is be knowledgeable about your own products. The size, colors, special orders, what you can and can't do for special orders. I have brought smocking plates with me, which is what the design is called, as a smocking plate, with me on some occasions. That doesn't always work, but it is a pull. The PowerPoint gives them ideas of what they might like for whoever it is. The other thing is, if you are looking for fairs, and this has been a big one for me right now, if you are looking for fairs, get social media to help you find them. I found a group not that long ago on Facebook, which kind of befuddled me in my area. I was just sent out a question on the browser and went Facebook groups for crafters in Roanoke is what I was looking for. Found out there is a group that does all of Virginia. So something like that gives you the shows that are in, even if it's not your area, it maybe shows in another area that is in Virginia. But something like that, there are sites that have the bigger craft shows, like the ones that are huge, that cost lots of money to be in. But for the littler shows, like the ones at the church or the ones at the school or the ones that aren't as well known, this gives you access to those and a possibility to get into those. I don't know how many I've found this year just on that site that I didn't know about any other way.
Oh, nice. Do you typically like start planning for markets, like months in advance, or are you already looking into 2022?
I have 2022 at least sketched, or I have a list of things to sketch. A, we're moving to Roanoke. B, last year was coronavirus.
Yeah.
And, there was nothing resembling a market. We didn't dare do one. And it was fine. It's, honey, I'll be all right. Don't worry about it. We'll do it when we get a chance. So moving to another location and finding all these markets that we can do in that area or up next to DC, which is what we're kind of looking at as well. Yeah, I've already started looking at markets for next year. Yeah.
A good piece of advice, I guess, is to start looking now for 2022.
But a lot of them you don't find seat of your pants until the last minute. So you kind of have to be aware of those as well. Can I fit this in? Will it fit? do I have the funds to do it? Do I have the inventory to do it? So you have to look at it that way as well. But yeah, planning the big major shows that you might think that you'd like to do. There's a big one here that has been on my bucket list for a very, very long time that I'm hoping I can get done this year is Old Salem Days.
Ooh.
And it is expensive. They take a whole street down and the whole market is up and down the street. But apparently you cannot keep up hardly with the people that are buying.
Ooh,
so you have to figure that out that way with extra people to bring, to just people to run the cash register or run the cards or run the whatever, so that you're not completely blocked off trying to just make sales. So, and you've got to talk to people too. So, but things like that. I like to plan 2 or 3 big shows over the course of the year and then fill in as I can.
Nice. That sounds like a good one.
Yeah. Like I said, it's been on my bucket list for years.
It's going to happen. You're getting your studio, and now you're going to...
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Now you're going to get to go to the market that you wanted.
Yeah, and it'll be closer as well because it's in Salem, which is not far from Roanoke. So there we are.
Wonderful. See, everything is aligning.
Yep, that's right.
So I wanted to backtrack a little bit to something you said about like signing up for door prizes and how that allows you to gather people's information for marketing, which leads me into our next topic, which is social media marketing. And you have really kind of built an amazing network.
I have built an insane asylum is what I've built.
But it is awesome though. Like you really have built your business in a way that if social media were to disappear tomorrow, you would be fine because you have you would do better than most, I think.
Yeah.
Because you have kind of figured out ways to build kind of that email marketing and networking aspect to your business, which when I go to markets, I don't see a lot of makers, especially those of us that are, again, like millennials or younger, doing email signups or, giveaways to get people's emails and building our email lists. I don't see that a lot. I actually started doing it after the first conversation I had with you.
I gave you an idea.
I was like, Paula knows what's up. I'm going to start gathering emails and building like my email marketing. And so I want to touch on that a little bit, but I also I hope you don't mind me sharing this, but you're in your 60s-ish in there.
65, 66 in December. So I will fess. I don't care.
And I legitimately, like, and in all honesty, have to say I'm blown away by your social media game because you are on everything. You've incorporated it into your branding and your marketing. You're on like 6 social media platforms. You've got websites. I mean, it's really amazing. You've just dove in and we're like, this is happening. This is how it's going to be. How did you start setting up your social media sites? Like, what was that whole experience like for you?
And by the way, I have added TikTok. I haven't done anything with it yet, but TikTok is coming.
Oh my gosh.
That one was one that Lucy suggested. And I went,
oh yeah.
No, it was somebody else that suggested it. And I went, and okay, we're going to try TikTok. We're going to at least experiment with TikTok.
Yeah.
Because my bachelor's degree is in business with a concentration on marketing, I had been using Facebook, but, going, okay, there are other versions of social media. Let's see what else is out there and let's see what I can get on it. And the biggest thing that I have learned is from various articles I've read, people I've talked to, books that I've read, because I've read a lot and heard a lot and, just glance at an article or whatever, is that each one of these performs differently and for a different target group. So Facebook works well sometimes for me, but not always. Right now, Instagram seems to be the one that is just off the charts. Whatever I post on Instagram, I get all kinds of followers for. I'm not sure if it's because I'm using Canva to set up the plates for those, so it's not just pictures, it's pictures and da-da-da. There's other things involved with it. And I'm thinking that has a lot to do with it. It looks more professional, which has been good. I blew my husband away a couple months ago, and he said, "You did that?" Yes,
Canva is
Canva,
life.
remember?
Like,
he said, okay.
Canva is life.
But looking at the different social media and how to attack those in the different way, I use LinkedIn because LinkedIn gets to a certain audience. I use Twitter because that gets to a totally different audience. And Instagram is another audience altogether. And then Facebook is kind of like the fill-in because it does everything.
Mm-hmm. What was the hardest one for you to
The first one?
Into?
Facebook.
Facebook?
Yeah. And then I made a page for the business, and because I was on Facebook, made a page for the business and then started branching out from there. So it was Facebook first.
Besides, I mean, just having to learn, everything that goes into the algorithms and all that, which I think all of us.
And I still don't have them right.
I think we all struggle with this at some point. But like, what's one of the biggest challenges that you've experienced with kind of, well, I mean, I guess let's look at it from an aspect of COVID-19, having to go from in-person markets, I imagine probably fairly frequently, to only selling online. Like, what was one of the biggest challenges that you had trying to make that transition, or were you already set up and good to go?
I wasn't already set up, and I kind of upped my game when we started with coronavirus. But my biggest challenge will probably remain my challenge to whatever is pictures. I am not a photographer. I am not good at it. I know I'm not good at it. So, at least trying to make something that looks presentable. When we get to the new house with the new studio, there is perfect light in there. I think I will have a better chance of getting them halfway right. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't say all the way right, but halfway right, so that they look better. But lighting and getting the pictures to be what I want them to be. The biggest issue with the smocking is that people want to touch and feel.
Oh, yeah.
Bravo. Amen. I love it. But it's hard for them to touch and feel on a social media platform.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking the studio might be my boon for that, because there will be studio hours. People can come in and, touch and feel and whatever, and decide if they want something
smart.
or not. But yeah.
That's very smart. Yeah. Did you? Yeah. So to go back real quick, what has worked really well for you on social media? You're saying Instagram is really kind of picking up for you right now, but like overall, what has your experience been like?
People want to see pictures of the product. They want to know what size it is and how much it is, which is an advantage for Facebook as well as Instagram. They both will do it that way. They will pump directly from my website right onto the Facebook and go, this is this much and it's this size. Perfect. Mm-hmm. That has probably been the biggest thing. I can put sizes on with Canva, and that has helped a whole lot. You're not going to be able to miss it. Lucy does a lot of things with Black Friday, Cyber Monday that I have ripped from her, and she knows it. Mm-hmm. She put them out there. I ripped it. That's okay. The number of emails, when to start your social media, how many emails you should do a week before a certain promotion, how many posts you should do. And if your listeners are not acquainted with Later, Later, please look at it. There is a free program, and eventually probably mine won't be free, but for the craft show this past Saturday, I set up 2 different posts at 2 different times. One when we got there, one a little bit later than that. So I didn't have to play with social media all day. Yeah. Now, if I wanted to send out a video, I could have, but I didn't really have the space to do that. So I didn't. But you've got the advantage with Later to be able to set it up ahead of time, knowing that Later is going to send it out and you're free.
Yeah. Luckily, I mean, I guess a pro to kind of living in the digital age or social media age is that there are platforms like Preview and Later and Tailwind and even Canva now that you can schedule your posts through. Mm-hmm. Makes things way, way easier.
It does. And I try to have mine scheduled the week before on a normal week, much less a very abnormal week, so that Friday all of my posts are done for the next week, at least the first post. Now, the second one I tend to want to do myself. I post twice a day, sometimes 3 times a day. It depends on what's going on.
Man, you're on top
But
of your
there's
game.
at least one that goes out in the morning about 7:30, and then there's 1 or 2 others that go out in the afternoon.
2 to 3 times a day. That is wild. I can't believe it.
But once you have your format set up with whatever you're using for hashtags for the week or whatever, put in a little bit of line, whatever your hyperlink is, plop a picture in there, you're done.
Yeah.
It's not, you're not creating it from nothing every day. You're, embellishing or fixing or adding something new or whatever.
Not reinventing the wheel.
Yeah. You don't have to, people are expected to see something usually. So if they're seeing something, and especially something with pictures, you got it.
So when you got on social media, like you kind of like taught yourself and got in there for, I'm going to say like more experienced crafters. So we'll say, folks that maybe are a bit older and are kind of resisting getting on social media. What advice do you have for those more experienced crafters about getting on social media?
If they're hesitant, and I was hesitant to get on social media, jump onto Amazon. They have buku books that you can get for nothing or next to nothing about Instagram, about this, about that, and how to do it, the actual dynamics of how to set up a business Instagram account so that you're not floundering and trying to figure it out yourself. Now, I did that, but there are books now that are available that I still look at and go, okay, I need to do this better. What do I need to do? So reading, it's a constant struggle of reading and adding to your knowledge. It's not a one-shot deal.
Yeah.
Like everything else.
No, that, and also for listeners, Paula keeps mentioning Lucy, and we're talking about Lucy Bloom, I guess I'll refer to her as that, but she's actually has been a guest on the podcast. So definitely check out her episode, but she has an amazing Facebook group that is all about kind of crafters helping crafters and sharing information and all kinds of amazing info that it's just insanely useful information over there. And so if you are maybe on Facebook, but not other social media, checking out her Facebook group is a good way to kind of get a feel for what everyone else is kind of doing out there and what maybe you want to try. So
and she has a level of organization. Sorry, Allie. She has a level of organization that you're going to find very, very helpful without killing yourself.
Yeah, it is insane. But I'll include a link to her Facebook group as well in this episode. So if you're interested in kind of seeing what goes on over there, you'll be able to find it quite easily. Before we wrap up, Paula, do you have any maybe last words of advice or tips for the makers and the crafters out there?
I can't think of anything in particular other than that's a constant battle. It's a constant looking, and use whatever tools you can find or gather to help you find what you need to find. There's a lot of crafters in my area, in this area. There were when I lived in Bedford as well. Roanoke apparently has a fair number as well. So use whoever is around you that you find to make connections, to find out what they're doing, or to help somebody else out with something. There was a lady at the show that Saturday beside me, and she was a new crafter, and I'm going to send her a bunch of information of this is what's available, this is a website that you might look for this, or here's a Facebook group or whatever, something like that, just to kind of encourage her and to nudge her along and give her information to kind of help her with what she's doing as well.
Now, that's the great thing about the maker community is usually I've yet to encounter anyone who goes against this, but we're usually a pretty good group of folk we're willing to help each other out. So that's definitely a huge plus about being a crafter and a maker. Is there anything that you're currently working on?
I'm working on little baby dresses with smocked bonnets to go with them for next year. I have a yellow one that's nearly done. I'll do a pink one, and then there's another one as well.
Where can folks find you? Where can folks check out your work?
The main site is www.especiallyforyou2.com.
I will, of course, include all of Paula's information in the episode description. So if you're looking for some super cute, just freaking adorable, tiny people clothes, definitely go and check out her work. It's, again, I'm just amazed by it that you do it all by hand. It just blows my mind. I can't thank you enough for joining me today and sharing your knowledge and kind of your journey as a maker and kind of diving into social media and what that's been like for you.
Well, thank you for having me. I've enjoyed this. This was fun.
Thank you again. And I also want to thank the listeners for tuning in to today's episode. If you have questions, comments, thoughts for me or for one of my guests, you can text or call us on our hotline, 252-419-6004, and we will answer your questions on a future episode of the podcast. Be sure to like, rate, and review the podcast, and you can follow us on Instagram at wandering_creative_. And please visit our website, cootscreations.com.
This has been a Coots Creations production. Follow the show on Instagram at wandering_creative_ and on Twitter at wandering_pod. For more information, go to cootscreations.com. Like, rate, review, and subscribe. To sponsor the Wandering Creatives podcast, visit www.cootscreations.com/podcast-sponsorship-opportunities. You can also click the link in the episode description below. To be a guest or a featured maker on the podcast, click the link in our Instagram bio or contact us at cootscreationsllc@gmail.com.